and in this video, I'm going to be doing my full review on the new Samsung Galaxy A71. Now, you guys might have seen yesterday that I also put out my full review on the new A51, which is the other slightly smaller and slightly cheaper A-series phone that Samsung released just a couple of weeks ago as well. But for this video, we're strictly going to be focusing on the A71 and why I think this is probably the best all-around option for folks who don't want to spend four figures on their next smartphone. I also want to make sure I don't repeat or rehash the same stuff I said for the A51, since they are such similar phones. So I'll be focusing a lot on what makes this phone in particular so good, and what separates it not only from the A51, but from most other budget and mid-range devices. With the popularity of Samsung's A-series phones in general, and especially with their huge success here in the US last year, I suspect a lot of folks will be looking at this device for their next phone as it becomes more available. So I think right off the bat, the thing that separates this phone from pretty much every other device at its price point is the camera setup. You've got four lenses around back to utilize: a fresh new 64 megapixel f1.8 aperture main shooter, a solid 12 megapixel ultra wide lens, the 5 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a new macro lens, which is a bit of a strange addition. I've spent the last couple of weeks taking pictures in all sorts of different conditions, and the thing that gets me every time with these results is the amount of detail in every shot. The camera hardware on this phone is paired with internal specs that can process the images really well, and the result is a scene that looks great every time. And it's really that ability to capture the detail that separates the A71 from the A51 and a lot of other devices. I also found the camera overall to be super consistent no matter what I was shooting. I didn't have to fight much with over or underexposed shots, and there weren't any instances where I felt the A71 missed the mark. When we move over to the wide angle lens, I was once again really impressed with the consistency. What we saw on the A51 with its inability to properly handle shadows and dark areas is not something found here. There's not a whole lot of difference going from standard to ultra wide, and that's really the most important thing in my opinion. The macro lens is cute, I guess, but on a phone like this, a telephoto lens would have been a better option. I think adding that would have been the cherry on top to a perfect camera setup, but I can at least appreciate Samsung's efforts in offering something sort of different. And up front, Samsung made some changes and slight improvements to the selfie camera too. Once again, the most noticeable thing I found was a great amount of detail, especially with live focus. Outside, you've really got a great shot, but unfortunately, the less light you have, the softer and grayer the pictures become. It's a shame because for whatever reason, Samsung just hasn't nailed it yet with the front cameras on the A-series phones. And while the A71 has a ton of potential, I think it still falls a bit short in certain situations. One area that's always been a weakness for Samsung in general is video recording. And while the A51, I think, missed the mark, the A71 offers all you can ask for. The big thing is that I didn't feel like the A71 was constantly focus hunting and warping the video all out of control. It offers a much more pleasing and confident shot, especially compared to the A51. Stability I found to be better too with the A71, and all in all, while I still consider videos as a weakness with Samsung phones in general, I don't think too many people will be disappointed here. The other big thing that really makes the A71 great is the internal specs that power it. And this is also one of the reasons I think this device is a better long-term investment over the A51 and some other devices. Inside, the A71 packs the Snapdragon 730 chipset, coupled with an Adreno 618 GPU. You've also got either 6 gigs or 8 gigs of RAM and UFS 2.1. Now, you can debate me on this, but I'd consider those to be significantly better than average specs. And realistically, here in the US market, there isn't even another device for sale with these specs. Internationally, you have some competition from Xiaomi, Reno, and Oppo, but particularly in the States with these specs, this phone has a solid opportunity to outshine the competition. Out of the box, the phone ships with Android 10 and One UI 2, both of which give the phone a clean and smooth user experience. And that's exactly how I felt each day I used this device. For everyday tasks, there isn't anything this phone can't handle. And even as you start to push the device harder and harder, I didn't find it having any issues. The real value here though is in the long term, like I said. We can already expect at least 2 years of software updates and support, which is pretty good. good. But I also think this phone is not only a few months ahead of the competition right now, but will also be a solid, long-term investment some 3 or 4 years down the line, maybe even more. That's not something I felt comfortable saying about the A51, and overall, I believe this phone will have a longer theoretical lifespan than most other devices currently offered for sale at a similar price. Powering everything is a pretty respectable 4500 mAh capacity battery, which consistently gets me more than a day's use no matter what I do. But it isn't really a concern anyway, because with the super fast 25-watt charging standard that's supported with this device, a few minutes on the charger means I get a few more hours of use. So now that we've talked about what really sets this phone apart, let's talk about all of the other stuff. The 6.7-inch display on the A71 is fantastic. It's what impressed me on the A50 and A70 last year, and I think it's the thing that's going to impress anyone else who hasn't seen an A-series phone in person yet. The AMOLED panel is bold and bright, and it's probably my favorite thing about using this phone in general. Sure, it is still only 1080p, but most people either won't care or won't be able to tell a difference anyway. And on the plus side, while you get just a tiny bit more screen real estate going with a larger A71, the A51 has the exact same display technology, so you can save a bit of money if you need to, while still getting that awesome viewing experience. Samsung also migrated over their famous Infinity O cutout and increased the screen to body ratio while minimizing the bezels, especially at the bottom. So overall, visually, this is a device that fits in line with anything else offered in 2020, and I think that was a great move. The phone doesn't look as dated as when the teardrop notch and big bottom chin were offered, and I think it's the polished design that this device really deserves. Physically, this is a phone that somehow both screams quality while simultaneously making it very obvious that it isn't a flagship device, and I'd consider it both a positive and a negative thing. On one hand, the phone itself looks premium, even with its all-plastic build. The color-shifting rainbow effect and polished edges mimic even Samsung's most expensive devices, and in the hand, the phone feels solid, sturdy, heavy, and overall conveys the sort of feeling that you've got a high-quality device. Now let's talk about a few of the things that are missing from the A71. The first isn't a huge deal to me: wireless charging. With the 25-watt adapter, I'm always going to prefer a faster charging speed than the supposed convenience of laying it on some surface. So that's something I can not only look past, but it's just something that should be standard. I don't even think about my phones getting wet usually, but the A71 is a device I had to be a little extra careful with, just in case. I'm sure the entire build of the phone would have to change, and it's not an easy fix, but it's just something I noticed was missing more often than I thought I would. Overall, the A71 is a fantastic phone from start to finish. This is the perfect device for folks who want an awesome phone, but don't want to spend a lot of money. If anything, it's probably the best bang for your buck device that's out right now. I think my only wish is that I'd want this phone to be a little more different than the A51. The internal specs are probably the decision maker, to be honest, and I'd choose this device based solely on that. But a higher quality build, maybe better display, more camera features, or a couple of other perks probably would have made sense. In the end though, this is a phone I'd recommend 100 times over.